They say that whoever hasn't witnessed the sunsets over the Nile hasn't truly seen anything at all. Here the sun bids farewell to its ocean with breathtaking solemnity. I'm painfully aware of how impossible it is to capture what takes place each winter evening in the Egyptian sky, a sky so unlike our own. The glow sets the heavens ablaze with delicate translucent hues. You look, and in the blink of an eye, it's gone. This grand spectacle is astonishingly brief. In the west, the fire has already faded, and in the east, where the right of the Arabian mountains meets the banks of the Nile, a new scene unfolds. Against the astonishing blue-violet sky, the mountain peaks ignite with a luminous crimson light. But it lasts only for a moment and then vanishes into darkness. And have any of us who live in the north ever seen the crescent moon resting on its rounded side with its horns lifted evenly upwards? Here, it's so easy to believe in the existence of gods. In Hathor, the celestial cow, in Ra, the sun god, in Hapi, the guardian of the Nile, or in Osiris, the ruler of the underworld. Traveling along the west bank of the Nile, it's impossible to miss those awe-inspiring giants, the Colossi of Memnon. They were named after the ancient Greek hero who defended legendary Troy and fell at the hand of Achilles. The Greeks have a habit of attributing the oldest monuments in foreign lands to their own heroes. Statues, tombs, even entire roads were ascribed to Memnon, though the man himself had nothing whatsoever to do with them. In truth, the Colossi of Memnon are two magnificent statues of the great Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III, who ruled in the 14th century BC and was a brilliant sovereign. He inherited the traditions of his illustrious predecessors, preserving Egypt's power and prosperity throughout his reign. A grand mortuary temple was built in his honor, said to rival the temple of Amun at Karnak in beauty. Today, however, only the two colossal statues remain, one standing proudly before the first pylon. At the king's feet is depicted his wife, the beautiful Queen Tiye, whom he's guarded for thousands of years. Since the beginning of our era, when only these statues remind of the temple, they've continued to attract attention. But not merely because of their grandeur or sheer scale. The real reason lay in a unique phenomenon. Just before sunrise, the colossi would emit a strange sound, as if a harp string had been plucked. People were so captivated by this marvel that they would arrive in the dead of night, sitting in silence and waiting for the sound to come. And the colossi never disappointed. With the first light of dawn, the mysterious song would ring out. It was named the Lament of Memnon, and it inspired many poets to compose verses and sonnets. Scholars believe this phenomenon can be explained by the physical properties of the stone itself. After the cool of the night, it begins to warm with the first rays of the sun, causing a distinctive cracking sound. Similar noises have been recorded in several other ancient structures under comparable conditions. Incidentally, it was Amenhotep III and Queen Tiye depicted at his feet, who were the parents of the famous religious reformer Akhenaten. He forced the Egyptians to abandon their pantheon of gods and worship only the sun disk Aten, which plunged the country into a deep crisis and nearly destroyed the Egyptian state. Fortunately, Akhenaten's son Tutankhamun revived the old traditions and brought a new era of prosperity to the land. Many people mistakenly refer to the entire west bank of the Nile at Luxor as a Valley of the Kings, and believe it consisted solely of the tombs of pharaohs and nobles. In reality, it is an immense network of different complexes, each with its own specific role in the context of mortuary cult. The Valley of the Kings with its tombs is only one part of this complex. Temples dedicated to the pharaohs were no less significant than their burial places. During their lifetime, these temples served both as places of worship and, in some cases, as royal residences. After their deaths, they continued to function for centuries, performing mortuary rituals to preserve the pharaoh's name for eternity. only a select few such temples exist, for only the greatest pharaohs could afford to build such a monument during their lifetime, or to complete the temple of their illustrious father. One of the most extraordinary of these was Amenophium, the temple of Amenhotep III, whose colossal statues we have just seen. Sadly, the reliefs, statues and monuments of this temple were so exquisite that it began to be dismantled even in ancient times. Ramesses the Great did not hesitate to usurp Amenhotep's sanctuaries, and Ramesses III, when building his own temple beside it, eagerly reused the stone from the old structure for his new one. As a result, this ancient architectural masterpiece has survived only in fragments, incorporated in several later temples. As we already know from previous episodes, the Ramesside dynasty came to power after the line of Tutankhamun and Horemheb died out. Seti I proved himself to be a great ruler, and his son Ramesses II sought to equal him in every respect. He was a courageous warrior who personally led his army into battle and achieved victory even when the enemy's forces were far greater than his own. It was said that during battle his chariot was guided by the god Amun himself. Ramesses II was proclaimed a god during his lifetime and was regarded as the embodiment of the golden soul of Ra-Horachti, the sun god. For his achievements he was given the title the Great. All the pharaohs who came after him aspired to emulate him. Many even adopted the throne name Ramesses at their coronation, as it had become almost synonymous with the word king. On the West Bank of Luxor, one of the great mortuary temples of Ramesses the Great was built, the Ramesseum. Its walls are covered with reliefs depicting the key moments of the king's life. Ramesses II ruled the 67 years and died at about the age of 90, an extraordinary long life, with the average life expectancy at the time being around 30 years. He outlived at least 2 generations of people who were born and died under his reign. To them the pharaoh must have seemed truly immortal, a ruler destined to reign forever. The first 15 years of his rule were devoted to military campaigns, including the famous Battle of Kadesh, which nearly cost him his life. Later, peace was established with Egypt's neighbors, and the next 50 years became a time of stability and prosperity for the country. This period was also marked by monumental construction projects. Ramesses II left behind thousands of statues, reliefs, temples and shrines all along the Nile. Among the greatest monuments of his reign was the mortuary temple of the Ramesseum. Sadly, little of it remains today, but even its ruins have preserved the memory of this magnificent pharaoh for future generations. Despite his name, Ramesses III was not a direct descendant of Ramesses the Great. In fact, he did not even belong to the 19th dynasty, but to the succeeding 20th dynasty. And many years and many other pharaohs had passed between their reigns. Nevertheless, he became one of the most prominent figures of the later Ramesside period. Ramesses III came to power after a long and bloody series of eternal conflicts that tore a country apart and produced so-called one-day kings who ruled for only a very short time. It was at this turbulent moment in history that his figure emerged. Ramesses III greatly admired Ramesses II and naturally wished to emulate him, even though he himself was short and stout, whereas Ramesses II had been tall and powerfully built warrior. His greatest achievement was the creation of the monumental complex at Medinet Habu. The location of his temple was not chosen by chance. Since ancient times, this site was known as Jameh, the sacred hill. According to legend, after the god Amun created the universe, he rested beneath this hill in the form of the serpent Kamutef, the creator snake. Even before his reign, this place had been home to earlier sacred sanctuaries, including the shrine of Hatshepsut and Thutmose III, which were reviewed by their successors. Ramesses III incorporated this sanctuary into his own temple complex, enhancing its sacred authority. Thanks to this, the site was later expanded by the Ptolemies and by King Taharqa, ensuring its prosperity for centuries. In the 11th century BC, during a period of great unrest, craftsmen from Deir el-Medina, who had been responsible for constructing royal tombs, relocated here. The massive walls of the complex, 18 meters high and 10 meters thick, transformed the temple into a virtual, impregnable fortress. To strike fear in his enemies, Ramesses III had scenes carved on his towers, depicting himself in the traditional pose, smiting his foes. Within the same complex stood a luxurious house of the royal wives, where the pharaoh spent time with his consorts. The pylon is exceptionally well preserved, and you can still see small windows through which flags were hoisted on flagpoles set in special niches during festivals. The reliefs once again show the king smiting his enemies, and this is no coincidence, for throughout his reign, Ramesses III had to face and defeat numerous foes. It was a time of great turmoil. Many kingdoms were destroyed and wiped out by the Sea People Libyans and other invaders. Only Egypt managed, though with immense difficulty, to survive. Incidentally, this temple complex became the last monument on which real battles and scenes of war were depicted. Unfortunately, the complex later served as a Coptic monastery, and the monks of that time destroyed everything they could reach. Interestingly, what irritated them most were not the depiction of the gods, but the statues of the kings themselves, which they smashed with particular fury. Pay attention to how the royal cartouches and inscriptions were carved in relief. In some places, the depth reaches up to 20 centimeters. Dip a nose for a hand to fit inside. And can you guess why? For the same reason that allowed Ramesses III to usurp so many monuments, temples, and statues of his predecessors, to prevent his own descendants from doing the same. Such deeply carved inscriptions could not be reworked or erased. In the next courtyard stands the temple dedicated to the god Ptah, completely relocated from the nearby temple of Amenhotep III. What's more, even the king's throne names on it were left unchanged. In his admiration for Ramesses II, Ramesses III not only sought to resemble him, but openly copied him. As a result, Medinet Habu in many ways mirrors the Ramesseum, with some reliefs copied down to the finest detail. One famous example is the Great Harvest Festival scene. A sacred bull, symbolizing the cult of Min, the god of fertility, accompanies the pharaoh as he cuts the first sheaf of the new crop with a golden sickle. The sheaf is carried in triumph as a symbol of Egypt's fertility. And above, where at the Ramesseum Nefertari danced with castanets, here it is the Ramesses III's wife performing the dance, though her cartouche remains blank. Ramesses III reigned for 32 years. One of the most curious details about his statues is that at his feet are depictions of his wives, yet none of them are named. The same is true for the images of his children. For reasons unknown, Ramesses III seems to have harbored hatred or deep resentment towards his wives, and this ultimately led to his death in what became known as a Harem conspiracy. One of the pharaoh's younger wives, Queen Tiye, plotted to place her son Pentaur on the throne. Joining forces with other women of the harem, the conspirators stole magical texts from the Ramesseum, crafted wax effigies of the king, pierced them with needles, and buried them along the road Ramesses traveled. They performed every possible act of sorcery and humiliation against him, until at last the pharaoh was murdered. His mummy revealed the brutal truth. His throat had been slit with an obsidian blade, cut all the way to the spine. During embalming, the neck had to be tightly wrapped with linen to keep the head attached to the body. The plot was eventually uncovered. The women were brought to trial, and 30-year-old Pentaur was executed. Although his body was not embalmed, it was discovered in one of the royal caches. For many years, it was known as a screaming mummy, because the agony on his face was so striking that scholars could not determine his identity. Pentaur was buried in an unmarked sarcophagus. His mother, Queen Tiye, for her role in the coup of regicide, was walled up alive. and her remains have never been found. As for the other harem women who stood trial, they caused a scandal. All of them were described as exceptionally beautiful and enchanting, and during the investigation, several judges lost their composure and fled with the women. The personal guard of Ramesses IV, the successor of the murdered king, caught them and returned them to the face justice. The women's noses and ears were cut off so they could no longer seduce anyone. In this state, they, along with the first group of judges, were sent to work in the gold mines for the state. The conditions there were so horrific that the punishment amounted to a death sentence. The journey to the mines led through a waterless desert, and less than a third of the convicts survived the march. In the mines themselves, cave-ins were frequent because of poor organization. But such was the price for killing a pharaoh of Egypt.